to UHSussex Voices, the podcast where we share inspiring stories from across our trust. Today we are joined by clinical research practitioner Abigail, a passionate advocate for sustainability who works in research. Abby believes that small changes can make a big impact, not just for our trust, but for the wider community. Before joining research, Abby worked as a nutritionist, and now she's on a mission to make research more sustainable. We can't wait to hear her story and learn how these changes are shaping a greener future for healthcare. Hi Abby, welcome to UHSussex Voices.
Thanks very much for having me today.
How are you?
All right, yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Good. So we are going to talk today about your journey into getting into healthcare and then also what you've been doing since you've arrived at UHSussex. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you from nutrition to research?
So as a kid, I was really into science, and I don't know if you remember, but there was a series of books and videos, sort of cartoony type series called How My Body Works. I don't know, maybe I'm aging myself a little bit. And it was really gave me a sort of look inside of my body. It came with this like little figurine that had organs that you could take in and out and rearrange and put back in the right position, and it kind of followed different bodily processes like blood cells and viruses being the bad guys, and it really sort of inspired me to learn science at school. Science is one of my favourite subjects, particularly human biology, and the practical side of the lab skills that we learn, and again how the world around us impacts on how our body works. And on top of that, my family we're a bit of foodies. My dad taught us, me and my sister, how to cook. So it kind of bringing science and food together got me quite interested in food tech and nutrition at school. And I almost actually, instead of nutrition, became a chef. I did a few chef's courses as a kid. But it turns out I couldn't really stand the heat in the kitchen.
Oh, it's so stressful.
So, yes. So that didn't work out as such. But funnily enough, nutrition wasn't actually the first thing I decided to do at university. My school, although I was interested in taking forward food science as part of my A-level, and there was only a couple of us that wanted to do it at the time, which meant they unfortunately didn't carry on the course. Instead, I kind of focused a bit more on IT and computers, and I would say I'm quite computer literate if you ask any of my colleagues. So I actually decided to do computer science at university to start with, combined with Japanese. So I had a little bet with one of my friends around 16 or so to see if we could learn Japanese off of YouTube, and got really interested in the culture and also the food side of things there, and learning about their interest in nature and food and sort of seasonal cuisine there. So actually my first year at uni was Japanese and computer science, because at the time we could combine those subjects. Coming towards the end of my first year, I thought actually computer science was a whole another language that I didn't really understand.
That's amazing.
So, and regrettably didn't at the time want to do a year abroad in Japan, although looking back that was one of
that would have been
biggest.
Incredible. Did you learn more Japanese from YouTube or your actual university?
Hopefully the university course, was very much solidified my learnings. But I met somebody who was doing a foundation science at the time in order to lead on to nutrition. And I had a look at the course, and the way she was describing it really reminded me about my love of food science and food technology, and also its interaction with our body as humans and how it impacted our health. So I decided to switch to nutrition from my second year, So it ended up being 4 years in total. So it involved lots of things like clinical nutrition, sports science, food science, new product development. And one of my favourite modules actually was looking at food science and being a bit investigative, trying to figure out how a party of people had come down with a certain illness, and you had to kind of trace it back depending on what bacteria was in their system, which was very, very much interesting to me. And throughout my whole time at university, to help pay for some of my Christmas gifts as a poor student, I took part in research myself as a participant. They used to give us Amazon vouchers for waking up early and ingesting all sorts of different concoctions. It was the Functional Food Centre in Brooks, so they were looking at things like cacao and different like baobab powders, which is like this dried citrus fruit or something like that, I think, from Africa. And they were looking at its impact on your glucose levels and your cognition, but it involved giving a lot of blood and, as I said, waking up early. So I've kind of been on the side of the participant as well.
That is fascinating. Do you have to stay in the centre? How does it work? That is really intriguing. It
was never sort of super long stays, but kind of early mornings, fasted. So you go in and you'd eat a cognitive muffin or drink a brain smoothie or something like that. And they test your glucose levels across the next few hours. The longest one I did actually was looking at hormones and appetite across the menstrual cycle, where you'd sit with this big hood over your face and it would measure what you're breathing in and out and estimate your kind of your carbohydrate and your fat usage, depending on what phase of your cycle was and whether they could relate it to your appetite. So that was really interesting, and got lots of opportunities to test my body composition using some of their gold standard stuff. So
that is fascinating. I've always wondered about those. I think even if I was given a placebo, I'd still feel like I'm reacting to something. I'd be hopeless.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think nothing was too unpalatable. To wake up to in the morning and have to drink or eat. So that really sort of started my interest in research, and obviously all through my nutrition course at uni, we were reading different research papers, compiling sort of evidence. And after uni, I went on to a couple of customer-facing roles, but was lucky enough to find a job up in Cambridge as a health coach for their community sort of council-funded healthy lifestyle program. So I started off as a health coach doing one-to-one health promotion, whether it was things like smoking cessation or improving people's physical activity levels. And I kind of worked my way up through that organisation to be a nutritionist for a group weight management within that same service. So I did that for a few years and started, was still reading nutrition research papers and using that to help inform the advice I gave my participants in this programme. But I started to think, really, actually, I would like to go back to the beginning and really see how they develop those recommendations and be more involved in the generation of that knowledge. So I did think about a career change to research, actually sort of half thinking about research, half thinking about actually would I like to do something more environmental, with my bit more hands-on out in nature. So between school and uni, I was doing some conservation volunteering at my local country park, which I really, really enjoyed, sort of creating different habitats for wildlife and clearing paths for people to walk and enjoy the nature at the country park. But kind of in the end settled on research and was lucky enough to find a job in Reading in the Royal Berkshire doing cardiology research. So it was a really small team, which I was really grateful for my first research job in healthcare, as that was the first time I was kind of exposed to a hospital setting. So it was really new, really bit more intimidating than these kind of like small intimate groups that we took part in Cambridge. So yeah, it was just me and my manager and in this cardiology research team, and it gave me the opportunity to learn lots of clinical skills like phlebotomy and ECG, performing ECGs and having a look at echoes, and it was a really supportive environment. And actually, cardiology is one of the best places to start, in my opinion, for research, because although you often get people who are really acutely unwell, they can be fixed fairly quickly with stents or medication. So it was a really inspiring look at kind of the first speciality I worked in research. Then obviously COVID hit, and we moved from a bit more practical research as research assistants or research practitioners to more data collection, and I learned more about that side of research, but decided we'd like to move a bit closer to friends. So that was either London or Brighton. So I managed to get a job down in Brighton doing a bit more COVID research here. But now I work across loads of different specialities like anaesthetics, vascular, neurology, and a few different surgical studies. So that's my journey in a bit of a nutshell from nutrition to research.
And I echo your thoughts about cardiology as well, because my dad a few years ago had a heart attack and he ended up having 3 stents, and he's never felt better, which is wild, isn't it?
Miracle, yeah.
Yeah. So what actually sparked your passion for sustainability within the healthcare setting then? You've obviously always had it in you when you talk about creating pathways in nature and stuff. Why does it matter to you in terms of healthcare?
Well, across my university course as well, we looked at the impact of food on health, but also climate on health as well. So climate change is sort of predicted to be the biggest impact on our health coming forward. So whether it's more instances of cardiovascular disease because of weather extremes, or air pollution causing more respiratory sort of dysfunction. So there's a really big overlap when you look at climate and health. So actually my interest did also start back in Reading. So it was a health and wellbeing ambassador there, and lots of different information kept coming out, especially over COVID, about impact of environment and our health. And actually, I used to car share with one of the estates managers over at Reading University, and he was a big environmentalist himself. So we used to talk a lot about environment and different things that we could do in our personal lives and at work as well. And it got me sort of thinking about how perhaps wasteful healthcare could be, but also healthcare's carbon footprint is really quite high. I kind of think it ends up being about 4% of our national carbon footprint comes from healthcare. So it's very impactful on the environment.
Yeah, but actually it doesn't need to be some big campaign. Actually, small changes make a big difference, don't they?
Yeah.
And we have seen some really good campaigns rolled out across this organisation. Can you describe some of those campaigns and then what changes we've seen as a result?
Yeah. So we're really lucky down in Brighton to have some really passionate people working on sustainability. So I think there's been a few fellows over the last few years. One particular I remember is an anaesthetics research fellow, Dr. James Dalton. He is still working on anaesthetic gas reduction. Anaesthetic gases are 300 times more impactful than carbon dioxide on our environment, and there's definitely better clinical alternatives. So they were looking at reducing nitrous oxide, piped nitrous oxide in the trust, maybe with better clinical alternatives like IV anaesthetics or local or regional blocks or conscious sedation, for example. So really removing that huge huge driver for sort of greenhouse gases there. But we've also, I've personally been involved in presenting some of the Gloves Off campaign to my colleagues in research, and that's definitely had an impact on their confidence to reduce unnecessary glove use and therefore waste from that. And I've seen colleagues from stroke and HIV also present this campaign to their colleagues and see a big reduction in gloves use. And I also combined that with a switch to reusable tourniquets, which have around 10,000 uses before they need to be thrown away. So in comparison with their single-use disposable tourniquets, although they still require cleaning, they still have quite considerable carbon footprint reduction when you swap them for their reusable alternatives. In research, as you say, we've tried to implement some small changes. So even on a more personal level, we've started composting our food waste in the department. So it's just literally sort of snacks and fruit and veg waste that we give to the church across the road that has a community garden and a community composting scheme where maybe 2 or 3 times a year you kind of get some compost back from it, which has been a really nice way to sort of refresh some of the green spaces around the department. I think over an 8-month period we saved 72 kilograms of food from going to landfill, which is basically the equivalent of driving from here to Bristol. So it's quite a lot when you think about carbon footprint.
Yeah, it is.
But other colleagues I've been in touch with in the hospital, like infection prevention control and procurement, with their cultural reduction campaigns, and procurement are able to supply data for sustainability or quality improvement projects. So they've been really inspiring when I think about the changes in the hospital with sustainability. But even in Brighton, institutions like Brighton and Sussex Uni are part of this hub to decarbonise the delivery of healthcare. So even wider institutions that are involved quite closely with the hospital are really pushing and driving forwards the sustainable healthcare agenda. And obviously we've got our green plan refresh coming soon as well. Yeah. So there's loads of stuff going on throughout the hospital all the time.
Yeah, I think some of it is having to learn new habits, because obviously when COVID came, we were instructed to, wear masks, and it was single use. So actually it's sort of learning that it is okay to reuse items and clean it. You don't always have to put gloves on, but that's quite a difficult task to manage when we went through such a traumatic period such as COVID.
Absolutely. I think behaviour change is one of the biggest challenges we face when we think about making it any kind of change, whether it's sustainability or changes in practice, even based on evidence, that research that we can show actually this is better for patients and better for staff working in healthcare. It's still then difficult to implement it after everything.
Yeah, totally. So what are some practical steps that researchers can take to reduce their environmental impact?
So probably over the last couple of years, we've really been trying to embed research in clinical practice, so really reduce the amount of times that patients have to come into hospital outside of their usual care. As we're finding that the movement of people and things is one of the big areas for greenhouse gases. So transport through driving or transporting samples in research, especially frozen samples, has a really high carbon impact. So actually rationalising some of the appointments and aligning them with patient standard of care can really help to make research more sustainable, and really making every test that a patient might usually have count if you need to add on samples like blood tests. So you reduce that extra bit of equipment that you may be using unnecessarily. And thinking about travel, sort of really encouraging people, staff and patients to use sustainable transport options. whether that be walking, cycling, or taking the bus or train to their appointments rather than driving by themselves. But also the research department and the research leaders are sort of refreshing their research strategy and delivery plan. And I think there's mention of more agile research teams, so really taking the research to patients rather than making their patients travel for research, because it cuts down the transport costs for them, but it also allows more people to take part in research. So those from more vulnerable or deprived communities really have the access to potential life-saving treatments, but also it can make that more sustainable as well. So decentralising the trials and pushing it out into the communities. I've taken part in one study recently where I just had to walk to my local boots, and they'd set up a little clinic in there where I could take part in research. So really accessible, very minimal transport for multiple people come into those clinics. We often find a lot of waste from our kits. So to make it as easy as possible, sponsors often send a box full of stuff, everything that you need for an appointment. So, but if we don't meet a schedule for recruiting, say, the first patient, then stuff expires and that kit has to be thrown out. And they also send spares just to make sure that if something like a blood bottle loses its vacuum, then you can take something from another kit or use a different kit. So it's a really difficult balance, making sure that a research study is well stocked and making sure that the waste is as low as possible, both throughout the study and right at the end. So you're not left with loads and loads of kits that you suddenly have to throw away or dispose of.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we've spoken about behavioural change being one of the challenges. What else is difficult in terms of trying to drive environmental sustainability?
So I think thinking about any kind of change, especially environmental changes, can be really overwhelming for a lot of people. So we know that a lot has to happen to improve our chances of not reaching that point where we're hitting the 2 degrees and above climate warming with really disastrous effects at that point. So that in itself can be a big thought experiment and very overwhelming to actually think, well, we can't perhaps do everything ourselves to stop that from happening. So that in itself is a big challenge. Really convincing people that with small changes and a really passionate group of people, you can have a big change, and you can sometimes do that by appealing to the different co-benefits of sustainability improvements. So whether that's saving time or improved health, as we talked about. So climate being a really big driver of ill health, or some people more focused on financial aspects of sustainability changes, or they might have a really personal reason. Someone in their family, for example, might have asthma, and they know that a reduction in cars will improve air quality, for example. So really finding out what's important to people have really helped overcome some of the barriers and encourage people to participate in those changes for sustainable healthcare.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? And I think we need to be kind to ourselves and think you don't have to do everything, because sometimes it's not actually feasible. So I'm thinking, like, logistically, I can't use public transport because I have such a small window of time where I have to do the school drop-off and then get to the office on time. But that doesn't mean that I can't do anything. There are definitely lifestyle changes that I can make that are within my remit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really nice quote from this environmentalist I used to watch on YouTube. She said something like, "You can't do all the things the world needs, but the world needs all the things that you can do. So you just do what you can, basically, to what was it within your remit, what's within your gift to do for the world, really.
Yeah, exactly. And your efforts are helping UHSussex deliver on its Our Future ambition, which is part of our new strategy, being ready for the world ahead. So what's next for you and your sustainability work within research?
So starting in January, I took on an apprenticeship. So I'm currently in the midst of my corporate responsibility and sustainability apprenticeship. So starting to look towards the end of it and look for an end project. So whether that's one of the projects that the Trust is running for their Green Plan refresh. Been quite lucky to be involved in some of the conversations around the single-use products in the theatres. So if I can get back into that when that really gets going in earnest, that would be a great end project for me. But I've also recently taken carbon literacy training, and I'm hoping to adapt that for my colleagues in the research department. So raising awareness and giving people a bit more hope when it comes to thinking about what changes they can do both in their personal life and in their work life through that training. And there's maybe potential to open it out to the wider trust as well. But one of my hopes is that maybe over the next few years I might be able to see the trust sign up to this Concordat for the environmental sustainability of research and innovation. So it's a framework that I think only one trust has signed up for so far. It's mostly places like universities and sort of dedicated research institutions. And it's something that you report to annually on 6 different priority areas. And it really shows how the organisation is committed to sustainable research delivery. So it's something I would like to look at a bit more in earnest over the next few years.
I guess that would hold us to account as well. Make sure we're doing what we promised.
I mean, we've got our green plan and our, as you say, our One Future ambition. So there's plenty that we're aiming for. So just be another sort of cherry on the top, I think.
Oh, amazing. And if you could give one piece of advice to staff who do want to start making a difference, what would it be?
I would say that staff and the public are, although it may not feel like it, they are overwhelmingly on your side when you think about driving sustainability change. And in driving that sustainability, we do drive a reduction in inpatient and staff burden as well. So it has the opportunity to benefit everybody. So if you are really interested to make a change in your area, there's lots of avenues for support, both inside and outside of the hospital. We've got people to guide you, like the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare, the Trust's quality improvement programmes, and of course, if you're wanting to change or to turn your idea into a research project, the research department can also help you do that. So there's loads of support out there for people wanting to make a change for sustainable healthcare.
Well, thank you so much, Abby.